attention. The bright lights of the television camera aimed squarely at his cause. Yasser Arafat would have been just another old man in a jalabia spouting anti-Israeli rhetoric, without the photogenic properties of the suicide bombers and their residue in Gaza and on the West Bank. So the world waited for Al-Qaeda, or Hezbollah, or the IRA, or FARC, or the Basque Fatherland to set up and declare another victory in the war against First World aggression, Western decadence, and the free market economy. Or perhaps the hostility was directed against the insidious creep of the Big Mac, or the pervasiveness of Steven Seagal movies, either of which a lot of Westerners would have found more logical than the first three as a cause worthy of riot in the streets. None of these organizations had set the bomb, however, or at least none of them took credit for it. A guy did go into Roy's bar in Wallace, Idaho 10 days after the event, and started bragging about how he'd just come back from putting a bunch of gooks into body bags. It turned out he was the founder of White World, which couldn't exactly be called a white supremacist group, as he was the sole member, and the closest he'd ever been to Thailand was the International District bus stop in Seattle, on his way to an Aryan Nations meeting in Aurora. The bar patrons hadn't left a lot for the police to scrape up off the floor anyway, not that they'd hurried to the scene when they got the call. But in Pattaya, the comic shop woman and the delivery boy and the Japanese tourist remembered the two men standing so calmly in the middle of so much death and destruction, and wondered. They would have wondered even more if they'd seen the two men turn and walk away, down Central Street, maintaining an even, unhurried pace, ignoring the wailing sirens and the flashing lights streaking past them toward the steadily mounting rumble of disbelief and horror. A middle-aged woman, plump and improbably blonde, did see them go. She wiped at the trickle of blood on her forehead where a piece of the left taillight from the delivery boy's car had sliced open her skin, replaced her digital camera in a capacious shoulder bag, and steadied her shaking legs to follow. The two men walked a little over half a mile and turned down a lane that led to the beach. Here, all was peace and order. No storefronts destroyed. No blood pooling in the street. No ambulance doors slamming on the dead and the dying. A causeway led to an outdoor cafe on a platform on pilings over the beach, and a table in the shade of a large marquee. They ordered chai tea in North American English, but the waiter, an elderly French expatriate who had fled to Thailand after the fall of Saigon, didn't think they were American or Canadian. They looked too much at home, unlike the average Western tourist who was apt to stare around incredulously as if he'd never seen a third-world country before. These men drank their chai tea without first scrutinizing the rim of the glass for germs. If they hadn't spoken such good English, he would have thought they were Korean. The height and the broadness of the cheekbones, perhaps. He also thought they might be brothers, but when questioned later he couldn't say why. Did they look alike? Not particularly. One seemed a little older than the other. It was just a feeling he had. One developed certain instincts after 30 years of serving patrons in a Pattaya bar, where sooner or later all the world came to drink. "A terrible thing, this bombing," he told the two men in a placid voice as he set their drinks on the table. "One lives and works one's whole life expecting these things to happen elsewhere, and then," he shrugged, "no place is safe nowadays, what with all these terrorists fleeing the American invasion of the Middle East to set their bombs in poor countries like Thailand." "A terrible thing," the older man said, without inflection. The waiter looked up to see a woman hovering in the doorway, with a smear of blood on her forehead, and he bustled forward solicitously. Her weight alone was indication enough of her nationality, and when she ordered a Budweiser it was confirmed beyond all reasonable doubt. But her voice was low and pleasant, a relief. He seated her a table away from the two men. Or no, the two had been joined by a third. He would have returned to take the third man's order, but a group of German tourists chose that moment to arrive and push all the tables into one corner together so they wouldn't have to suffer the horror of sitting separately. They chattered excitedly about the bomb, exclaiming how lucky they'd been to have escaped, and peppered the waiter with questions about who could have done such a thing, and was Thailand plagued with terrorists too. And the waiter took innumerable orders for oolong teenies and monkey faces. Nobody ordered scotch anymore. By the time he finished serving the Germans, the three men had been joined by a fourth, and he squared Gallic's shoulders and marched back to take their orders. His murmured apology for the wait was waved away with a magnanimous hand by one of the newcomers, a younger man, clearly of mixed Eastern and Western blood, who carried himself with the assurance of one who had been born free in an Asian nation, which meant either Singapore or Hong Kong, before the handover. There was some Norwegian or possibly some German mixed into his genetic pot, too. Something Teutonic at any rate. He wore very good clothes, a loose-weave jacket over a T-shirt and casual slacks. The huaraches were hand-stitched leather, and the bright red handkerchief peeping out of his jacket pocket was raw silk, probably also hand-stitched. The man smiled at him, a charming, slightly crooked smile, reminding the waiter of a photograph he had seen of a young Elvis Presley. He sighed a little. The fourth man was Chinese, older, and there was nothing to sigh over about him. His skin was burned a dark reddish-brown from years in the sun, his narrow eyes made narrower by folds of enveloping wrinkles, his hands calloused and hard, his arms roped with muscle. He looked like a street fighter, an impression underlined by the scar that bisected his left eyebrow and the nose that had been either so thoroughly or so repeatedly broken that its bridge was almost flat against his cheekbones. A puckered scar showed briefly beneath the short sleeve of his shirt. A puncture wound of some kind. A knife, perhaps? A bullet, more likely. The Chinese saw the waiter looking and returned a flat, unblinking stare. There was something reptilian in that stare, without fear or feeling. For all his experience à sang-froid, the waiter had to make a conscious effort not to take a step back. He had to clear his throat before he could summon enough voice to ask them what they wanted. The younger man ordered tiger beer, the Chinese ordered green tea. The waiter left, more quickly than he had arrived, and regained his manhood by bullying a British couple into a table in a high-traffic area right next to the bar and forcing them to order the bamboo martinis instead of the lager they had come in for. The Singaporean pulled out a cell phone and placed it in the center of the table. The Chinese lit a cigarette from the end of the one he already had going. The phone rang. The older Korean picked it up. A pleasant voice speaking fluent English with a thick East European accent said, "Mr. Smith?" "Yes." "Your Chinese guest is Mr. Fang. He holds a master's certificate, has 30 years' experience at sea, and will be responsible for putting together the crew and acquiring and operating the vessel. We have the highest confidence in his abilities." "Yes," Mr. Smith said. "The Singaporean is Mr. Nordman. In your initial contact with us, you stressed the need for someone who specialized in cargo." "Yes." "Mr. Nordman is quite simply a genius with international maritime shipping. He's also a full partner in Mr. Fang's concern." "Yes." "Your fee was posted to our account in Geneva this morning. I believe this concludes our transaction. It has been a pleasure doing business with you. If you need help in finding the appropriate personnel for future ventures, please don't hesitate to contact us." "Thank you." The older Korean disconnected.